Now, I want to tell you that this is going to be a special and fun night. I know you love him, so I'm not going to drag it out. I want to get to the heart of the story. Ladies and gentlemen, Jon Kane. Welcome.
It's weird.
So here we are. Isn't this fun, by the way? This is cool. If you don't like where you're at, by the way, shimmy your chair somewhere closer. I encourage you throughout the night, get closer. Look at those socks. Let's give it up for Johnny's socks. That's right. You know you're in a friendly crowd. How you feeling?
Good time to get some rest. Maybe get some extra sleep right now if you're tired. I'm good.
Guys, so I'm going to bring you up to speed to the good stuff, okay? And I'm going to tell the story from my perspective up until the moment where I feel like it really gets juicy. Now, Jon and I are sitting down at a coffee shop. This is, how long ago, Johnny? A year and...
July 28th.
July 28th. Good guess. So, so we're sitting down in this coffee shop, and we're having this conversation about the future. And what's going on in his life, what's happening. Here's what I recall from the conversation. And I've been known to make up things from time to time. So this is approximately what I remember. Is Jon said something to me that day that profoundly changed my life. And that was that he felt at the moment that he didn't have enough suffering in his life. Now, I've said this and quoted this many times. And what I took away from this moment was when he talked about being in college and wrestling. And he talked about how much he grew when he was being challenged at the core, when he was really, embracing adversity. At the highest level, he was growing. And so at this point, he was seeking out something to fulfill that place in his life. And right around that time, and I don't know if I'll get the order right, but Dustin Marks called, a Cutco alum. And he reached out to Jon and was talking about an Ironman that he was going to be doing a year from then, 364 days. And in that moment, Jon sort of he connected the dots. There was a friend of Jon's who had passed away about a month before, and Jon really wanted to do something for this friend of his. He wanted to help raise money. He wanted to help the family. So he committed at this time to doing an Ironman 364 days later. Had never done a triathlon at this point, but stepped up to say yes to doing an Ironman. Now, I'm not shocked at this point. This sounds like, I got it. This makes sense. Of course, that's what you're going to do. But this is where the journey begins. And over the course of the next year, I had a front row seat to Jon's life. I had the privilege, and I always say that, I have the privilege of having a front row seat to Jon's life, as Julianna did through the process. And we're going to talk to Jon and get to the root of the story. We're going to figure out what's going on in his mind through this year-long process. And our hope is that you take away life lessons and you relate them to your own world and apply them immediately. Julianna's here to share with us from her perspective what happened and what she brought to the table and why Jon considers Julianna the secret weapon. So we pick up the story at, let's say, the first 90 days when Jon's jumping into this. And Jon, take us to that time. You're just getting started. I'm sure you ran out to the store and bought the best bike and you bought everything that you needed to get going. What happened?
I borrowed Jon Vroman's mountain bike. And that's where it started. And I just started for 90 days. I was a little nervous. I didn't sign up right away, but I wanted to see if I could do any of this stuff because I had never swam a lap and didn't have a bike. And I'd ran before, and I didn't really like that a whole lot. But I want to go back to the why, and I want to tell you what happened. And this is, I think, the big thing. I think things happen, and this is the thing to pay attention to. So we're going to talk almost nothing about the race. That's not what today's about. But there's things that happen along the way, and why I agreed to do this is because there were things that happened. Many of you were a big part of that, and I want to thank all of you who supported what ended up being the end result. There's so many of you in the room that were part of it. But there were a lot of things that happened along the way, and it's my hope that over the next little bit of time, maybe there's some things that connect with where you are in your life. And one of the things that happened is that there was a defining moment. And The truth is that the gentleman who died, his name is Dean Cucinato, and his wife had been a mentor to my wife in yoga. My wife's shy, she's a little introverted, and she just went out of her way to make Tracy feel really welcome. And I met Dean one time. I met him at a yoga event. He was a musician, he was an athlete, and 30 days before he passed, he did the Broad Street Run in Philadelphia, which is a run that I did this past Sunday. And he ran it with his 2 girls and his wife. And 30 days later, he had been battling illness. His lungs gave out, and he passed away. Young guy. At his funeral, there was the Broad Street Medal. There was pictures of him surfing, pictures of him alive. And there was collages everywhere. You know, people make collages. And it was a really crazy experience because as I walked, and Tracy was out of town. She was doing a yoga event at Vitamix. And I didn't know the family. I didn't know anyone, but I felt like I just wanted to show up. And I went to this wake viewing, and I stood in line. There were so many people. And as I walked and I looked at the collages, it was, you know, I saw this great life that this guy had. And I could see myself in those pictures. You know, it reminded me about a life that I've been able to enjoy here with Cutco, with travel, with people, with friends. And what I came away from that experience, so for a month I just wasn't right. Something wasn't sitting right with me. I wasn't feeling, something was out of whack. And what I said to John that day, I did say that, but I just said that I kind of felt like I wanted to, you know, do something. You know, he was an athlete right up until the time he died, and I thought, I'm really not doing anything. I'm just kind of working out and going through the motions. I'd like to do something, and that's, so the point I would say is that there was, I started to pay attention to the fact that I was feeling something needed to shift, and I think we all have that at times. The second point is that sometimes when we put it out there that we want something to happen, it happens pretty quickly, and that was pretty neat. And so first 90 days was just about learning how to bike and swim, and the lesson from that time is when, as I started to do that, someone gave me a bike. I was at a 4-year-old birthday party, and the guy saw me read it in an Ironman book, and he turns out he had done Kona, and he offered to give me free swim lessons. I went to a front row event. Is Carl and Heather in the room? Where are Carl and Heather? Are they here? They're outside. So you heard a story about Carl earlier today. Carl heard that I was doing this and showed up at a front row beef and beer with a truckload of gear. Gears cost a lot of money. And he gave me all this gear. And then he and Heather came to the house for a weekend. He gave me his bike trainer, and he taught me how to swim, and he rode with me, and they spent a weekend at my house. And I want to say that I think we inspired them to have children because they played with the kids. But so I got a bike trainer. Carl got a kid out of the whole deal. Carl, thank you very much. But so one of the things about the first 90 days is I was just doing it by myself and doing it on my own, but these things kept happening where people kept showing up to help. And I didn't even know what I was getting myself into, but the lesson is, and what I want to share with everybody, if there's something in your heart that scares you, you know, I remember thinking, you know, I'm going to show up to this thing and people are going to show up for the race and they're going to think I'm there to deliver pizzas, you know, like he don't look like all the other triathletes. He's a little bigger than them. And, you know, I had this feeling like I didn't really fit in here, but I got a lot of confidence from people that wanted to help. So one of the lessons and takeaways was, wow, when you put something big out there, people will try to help you. And there's so many stories of people that helped in those first 90 days, but I was just kind of plugging along. So that's what happened.
Johnny, were there any other emotions that you were feeling in the very beginning, like what the hell did I get myself into, or was it so easy that you just...
I was really inspired about the idea of doing a fundraiser for this family, for their 2 girls, and being able to come a year later and say, I knew I had a community that would support me, and thankfully, and I just thought it would be so cool to be able to show up a year later and say, your husband inspired me to do this, and he's living through this, and I just, you know, that was the original plan, and so that really got me. I didn't even, you know, sometimes it's good to be dumb and not know what you don't know, and that's a fun place to be. It's like being a child. It's great to be a kid because you get to like live life and experience life freely, and you don't worry about all those fears. And that's what the first 90 days was like. There was a lot of playful, happy, you know. I think I wasn't too worried, but I was definitely having a good time learning. It felt other thing is it felt great to be a beginner again at something. And if I were to say one thing to everybody tonight, if you feel like everywhere in your life you're showing up and you're just doing what you always do, it felt really good to be totally not good at all this stuff and like being the worst person every time I showed up somewhere at all this stuff. And that was kind of fun.
Johnny, something I hear when you talk about this, and I remember hearing this ongoing, was how what really moves this guy is his desire to serve. And I think when you get to the place where you really know what moves you, then when you tap into that, you find unlimited fuel to chase your biggest dreams and goals. And so when the link is made to serving others for Jon, he goes to work and he makes magic happen. So I think it's a question we should all constantly be asking, and a lot of the speakers that you'll hear are going to constantly be asking that question, of what moves you and pulls you forward. So Carl was a key player, in this whole process. Julianna, that we're going to get to in a moment, comes into the story, and it plays a major role. But I just saw her face up here. Angie McDougall kind of stepped in at a certain point and offered some coaching and some advice. Angie's a 2-time Ironman finisher, and she's also what is her title now? She's some type of...
Intergalactic Person of Awesome.
Yeah, of Canada. It's her official title. So, Johnny, tell us what happens with Angie when she steps into your world.
So we were at a front row event where we had a bidding war for a Vitamix experience. And actually what happened is John Berghoff played a dirty trick on me. Because I was bidding against Angie for this Vitamix experience, but I knew Angie had more money than me. So I knew she was going to win. I was just trying to pump up the bid so that Angie would pay a lot for this Vitamix experience. So, there was alcohol involved, I'm not going to lie. And there was, everybody was fired up, and we pumped it up, and Angie won. And John Berghoff got up in front of everyone and said, I have it confirmed from the executives at Vitamix that we're going to give away another one for the same price. So I was like, how you have that regretful, remorseful feeling? Like, I called Jon Vroman. I was like, dude, I can't pay this right away. Hey, can I still go to Vitamix? It was like that. It was crazy. So here's the weird thing, in an environment of giving at the gala, which I know a lot of you will be there this December. It made how a bad decision turned into a good decision. Sometimes that's a good lesson. That's a fun one. But yeah, so Angie and I were having dinner at the Vitamix experience, and it was John and Tatiana and Tracy and I and Angie and Warren. And Angie said, "So what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? How's it going? What are you doing?" She was just hitting me and hammering me about what my training was. And she said, "If you don't hire a coach, you'll never do this. You'll never do this unless you hire a coach." And she got after me, and she said, "You can't do this. You're not going to do it." And so that was a wake-up call. And I guess, the thing I didn't realize is how right she was. I had a connection. I met with a guy who had, was on the U.S. triathlon team and had coached a lot of people, including a good friend of mine. We sat down, and I'll never forget the first meeting. He sat down and he looked at my old, because I'd only had a real bike for like 3 weeks at this point. And he goes, you got about a 40% chance of doing this if you listen to everything I tell you how to do. It's like, it wasn't good. It wasn't like a good early evaluation, And I remember sitting down, and he said, you better do it because you really want to enjoy the process. You want to learn how to bike and swim and run. Don't do it to do an Ironman. No one, he's like, this isn't not that it hasn't been done, but it's not looking good, basically, was his. He says, so before you sign up for $300 a month, and then all this expense, just know that you better really enjoy doing this. And so that was a moment, but so Angie was a big force in helping me to realize the step in the process, which is to take on something big, to get coaching and get help. And I think you all get that that's kind of a theme of what's going on in this community. I mean, there's nobody here who succeeds by themselves. And, how many, raise your hand if you've had a coach or coached somebody else? Okay, welcome to the jungle. So I think we get it, but I was you get to a place sometimes where you think, hey, I'm all coached up, I got this, I know what I'm doing, and I think that, you're probably not right. you probably need help, or you need someone to say to you, go get another coach, or go get someone to help you. And so that was a big takeaway.
I mean, so many great coaches in the room. I mean, I've worked with rising stock, as I know many people have. I've had, if I'm just looking at this from my own personal experience, and Johnny, you've watched this in my world too, it's even when I've asked Jon for help with something, when I finally just say, I need help. I remember Jon was working with Fee, and he told me to go work with Fee, and I hired Fee as my coach. And, I've had so many moments in my life, and I could just look around the room and see so many amazing people that I clearly identify when coaching enters the picture, breakthroughs occur. And I think that it's just selecting the right coach at the right time for you, but that's just such a key element. You see it show up so much because it matters. It's like mindfulness or meditation or whatever you want to call it. So many times when I'm listening to experts these days, interviewing the world's greatest, mindfulness shows up time and time again as part of what happens. Tim Ferriss. Anybody a Tim Ferriss fan? Yeah? So he, by the way, just one extraordinary guy. He'll constantly talk about mindfulness. And so I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of transition because, Johnny, you started picking up some coaching from amazing people like Carl and your tri-coach, and then, Julianna, you enter the picture 6 weeks before Jon's first race. And this isn't, he's not slow to jump into the mindfulness training. He goes full on with you, immerses completely, 3 sessions a week. And like I said, to really capture Jon's attention, I remember sitting at Jon's kitchen table one evening, and Jon was talking about his session with you, and he was just pouring it all out. And by the way, you have been coaching me, Julianna, just by way of this guy. I get a recap of all the sessions, and I'm blown away by how profound the impact has been on Jon's life, because this is a well-read, well-rounded, well-experienced guy who's constantly exposed to the world's greatest coaches, and yet he's raving about Julianna here. So Julianna, you jump into the picture. Before we dive into what happens in some of your earlier sessions, Jon, how did you find Julianna? How did you get connected? How did this all come to be?
How many of you remember Todd, who was here last year? My friend Todd was my rep from like the early 90s, and so Todd is the business manager for Shinzen Young, who's the founder of Basic Mindfulness. And Todd's a longtime friend and confidant, and I was freaking out because I knew I was in over my head with some of the things I was taking on, and mentally and emotionally I was doing the training, I was showing up, but I wasn't in a good place. And he said, you need to talk to my friend Julianna. She's, in his words, Shinzen's greatest student from his perspective. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know what you think, but he thinks pretty highly of you. And he said, you got to talk to Julianna. And he said, you got to totally dive into it. So this was a good friend, gave me some advice. I listened, and that's how we just had one phone call, and then we kept doing them. And that's how it started.
And at this time, by the way, just to give some context to where you are in your training, what does a typical day or week or training schedule look like at this moment when Julianna jumps in?
It's about 17 hours of training a week, of actual training time, not the prep time. So we're at 15 to 17 hours of training a week, usually 2 workouts a day.
So it's getting pretty intense right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember, by the way, that happening when Jon was starting off, he's just going for a little jog. And by the way, one of the things that I think your coach taught that's important to note is his coach taught him something that I've repeated many times since then, which is you go slow to go far. That was something that he said, right? You go slow to go far? Am I quoting that right?
Yeah, just a tip for anybody who's ever interested in doing something like this. He said the biggest mistake people make is they're fired up in the beginning, they overtrain, they get hurt. And he said for the first 3 or 4 months, you're going to feel like every time you're done working out, like you're going to want to work out more, you're going to want to go further. He said you got to stop. And his point was, if you want to do this, there's a way to build it. So my advice to anybody who's thinking about doing something like this or anything else big is talk to someone who's done it before and really get their tips, because I never would have thought that. And it was true, the first 8 to 12 weeks was a joke. It was really, it was not a joke, but it was not anything that you would equate with training for something like this. It was actually very manageable. And in fact, of the whole year process, there was only about 6 to 8 weeks that were ridiculous out of 52 weeks. I mean, 6 to 8 weeks were crazy from a human perspective, but the rest of it, you could deal with it, you know? And so I thought it was gonna be crazy for 52 weeks. So that's another piece of this that I learned. So sometimes things aren't always as bad as you think they're gonna be. And so that's just a thought.
I think, by the way, that's a really key point to add, which is that in your world, you know, a lot of times you get super excited about wanting to do something and you go all in, you go hard and fast. And you have to remember that this is a long race. You know, you're in it for the long haul and you're building something that you want to last. So watching Jon do this reminded me that when we want to do something extraordinary, we need to ramp up intelligently of how we do that. Create the right systems, follow the systems, like Amy was saying, in order to make it work. So Julianna, you jump into the picture to tell us what's it like working with this guy, and what kind of things were you talking about? What were you teaching him at this point?
Well, it was awesome working with this guy because this guy really does the work. And this is a long distance run. Mindfulness practice is a lifetime practice. You have to think about it like maintaining your health. Right? We maintain our health over our entire lives. It's not like you get healthy and then you're like, party for the rest of your life. It's pretty much something you have to do ongoing. And so there is this balance between this maintenance process of the skill development, but also, you know, what was awesome about Jon is his willingness to dive head first. And, you know, yes, there was some hesitation, not surprisingly. I'm telling him I want 3 hours of his life on weeks that he's already doing 17 hours of training, and he knows nothing about what we're going to be doing together. So there was a level of trust there and faith in the process that is unusual. And part of the reason I wanted him to start with immersive training is because this practice is super subtle at first. You're developing a set of attention skills, and it's the way that you focus on your experience that defines whether that experience motivates your behavior or distorts it, right? So you develop a specific set of attention skills so that you can focus optimally on your experience so that it motivates your actions and behavior. So Jon, you know, the point I'll make is that it's subtle at first, the rewards from doing this. So part of the reason I wanted him to dive in and do enough training is I wanted him to taste it, have a direct experience for himself. Because this is the type of training that only works when you yourself know the direct effect of it. You have to experience it in your body and your mind. You have to, that light of insight that mindfulness practice triggers has to go on inside you for you to recognize the value of it and want to stay motivated to do it. So for a lot of people, you need to, you know, if you can, you need to really get in there and practice so that you have enough rewards that you want to stick with it and make it a long distance run.
Yeah, so I think one of the things I want to mention right now is that I had heard about, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like, I didn't know what this was. And I had heard about like meditation and mindfulness, and frankly, I kind of had viewed that as an affront to my faith. And I just want to speak to that because if you're, you know, if you did your exercise today, maybe your spirituality or your faith is an important component of your life. It's a very important part of mine. And, you know, I always, you know, I didn't ever want to get involved in something that would like, you know, kind of drive a wedge between that. I viewed it as this was like Eastern mysticism or, and, you know, I was a little cautious getting into it. And I just want to say that because I think there's a lot of assumptions and there's a lot of things to understand about this. And one of the things that I understood very quickly is that actually this practice deepened my faith and my experience with my faith and my family and my relationships. And it didn't matter what my particular faith was, so I know we have people of different faiths here, but I just want to put it out there because that can be a real stumbling block for people to want to get involved because there's preconceived notions about what it is. And as soon as I got really clear that this wasn't going to be an affront to any of my other core values, it'd be like saying you've got a toolbox and you've got a hammer in it, and someone says, "Hey, would you like a screwdriver?" And you'd be like, "Yeah, that'd be cool." It's like it was just when I realized it was like adding a set of another tool. I really felt comfortable diving in, but I think my resistance was, if you know my friend Todd, he's kind of freaky, you know what I mean? He's kind of cool, freaky, and I was like, dude, I don't know, And I actually knew that some of Todd's personal beliefs about his faith were different than mine, and I thought maybe this wouldn't work. So that was a big thing for me that I just want to mention because it was important for me to maintain my integrity in these other areas of my life, and I didn't want this to, throw me off, if you will.
Yeah, I want to speak to that too, because I think it's kind of hard to wrap your head around the notion that something so practical as developing a set of attention skills can also have a spiritual aspect to it. It's like, what's the connection there between developing mental skills and your spirituality? And that's a surprise, a very unexpected one. I got into practice for my own very practical reasons and discovered, yes, that it does deepen your spirituality in unexpected ways. But the beauty of it is that it isn't tied to a particular faith. It's for anyone to do, of all faiths, and everyone can then experience the value of it.
Julianna, a question that all of us want to ask you.
Yeah.
Who's more mindful, John Berghoff or John Kane? No, I'm just kidding. Just teasing. All right, so
I plead the fifth.
so here's a question, right? So everybody in this room, so what's the nugget? What's the applicable? What's the first step? So you start working with John. John, maybe you can speak to this too about like what was something that you heard from Julianna that was very early on where you're like, that's low-hanging fruit. I can do that. That's going to change my life forever. Something that we could all practice starting immediately tonight. What's an easy step?
I think we're going to do some of this during the event, like everybody's going to do it. And one of the objectives of why I agreed to do this is because I wanted people to truly get the most out of the experience of having Julianna here, and I felt that by sharing the story, it might help people to be more curious and really engage in the practice. If we could kind of pop some of the fear bubbles or question marks tonight through this thing. So for me, one of the things that the biggest takeaway was I always thought about meditation as something you had to do quietly in a room without the kids. And what the biggest takeaway is that I've learned how to weave this, and I originally did this so that I could finish a race. I learned that actually, I really could care less about the race and that whole experience. The biggest thing that came from the race was this practice to be able to take with me for the rest of my life. And the race comes and goes, but the tools stay. And the tool of being able to have techniques or ways to practice mindfulness in almost any life situation. And we're all work in progress, and I'm better at it sometimes than others. But I feel like I have some better ways of navigating life, and I would just say, when I could be very specific about that, but through some of the techniques, I've had a better experience in situations that I've been in many times. Now when I find myself in that same situation, it's different because I have different tools. And so that's a big takeaway I did not expect. I thought I was just going to be like more peaceful or more relaxed or experience blissful states, all this stuff that you hear, and it was really, there was some of that, but that's not what it was. It was more, Julianna said something to me, and by the way, most of the coaching calls are not coaching, you're actually practicing. So it's like having a personal trainer. You don't go to I'm not sharing my feelings with Julianna. In fact, we almost knew nothing about each other. But it's like going to a personal trainer and they say, get on this machine and do this and do that and do that. That's what the calls are like. It's not a lot of fluffy stuff, but she did say, when she does speak, she says things that knock you out. And she said this to me one time. She said, we were talking about comparing mindfulness to surfing, and she said, when the waves come in, you can try to run from the wave, but it's going to hit you, or you can't push the wave away. And it was basically the idea that when things happen in our life, we try to stuff it down or run away from it or pretend it's not there. When you're surfing, that's not an option. The only option is to ride the wave that comes your way. And that really helped me to understand mindfulness in the sense that it doesn't matter what it is, what the situation, what the problem, what the thing is, there's a way to ride that wave that's different than all the other things that we do, whether there's the different techniques that we use to, instead of riding the wave, we try to do all these other things. And I would say mindfulness just helped me that no matter what happened in the race, and also more importantly after the race, to have some better approaches than the ones I was using to deal with whatever those waves were.
I want to make the observation too that your willingness to integrate it into, we would do calls sometimes while he was working out. So he'd call me while he was running, and we'd be doing practice sessions during his exercise. And we'll talk about the map at some point maybe, but basically Jon's willingness to do that accelerated his growth and rewards. And the thing that's quite extraordinary about this practice is it's non-linear. In other words, you do the techniques while you're working out, but those techniques can have an impact on getting your kids ready for school. So that's kind of the extraordinary. It's a generic set of skills that you're building that have an impact in all of your life. And if you want to make that growth process rapid, you integrate it into your activities, and that's what Jon did so effectively. And for me, when I started practicing, I only knew to sit down and do it. It took me years, and I built up a kind of a habit of that. It took me years to get over the habit and start bringing it into the activities of my life. And one of the things I'm really so thrilled about with my coachees is Jon is a great example. Their willingness to dive in and do it during the activities of their life, because I know that's going to speed up their growth process, and that's going to lead to more results sooner, and it compresses the learning curve. So it's just really exciting. That was one of the really exciting things for me, was to see you take it into all the activities of your life.
So Jon, it was a recent conversation weeks ago. Jon was driving somewhere, and he's like, normally on this drive, I would have been blasting music and making calls and doing all those things where I'd stay really busy in the car being productive. But he said at this point, I would just, for an hour, I did a meditation, a driving meditation where I was doing, it was see, hear, feel, right? And you just was, what do I notice that I see? What's around me right now? Can I soak all this in? What do I hear? What are all the noises? I don't want to spoil
Don't try
anything.
this on your own, kids. Get a little instruction.
What
you
do
can
I
see
feel?
me, and I'll give you a little.
So yeah, it's not just that simple. However, conceptually, you can get it. In fact, you could do it right now. Like you could, in this room right now, I think that, if you're talking about immediate application is, what do you see right now? How can you be more aware of your surroundings? By the way, I'm not the expert. I'm just telling you what my interpretation is coming from and watching and observing, right? And how immediate the impact can be. And that's just from an observation level, right? Is what do I feel right now? What do I hear? Those are powerful concepts because it just brings us to the present moment. So I encourage you to do that right now. Check in, and that's part of what I witnessed happening. I witnessed Jon being more present, and handling anything and we're going to get to that in just a second. So I'm going to kind of speed things along here a little bit. Let's fill in the gap, Johnny, about how you started as a mission to help your friend, but it switched to a front row focus, obviously, along the way at some point. How did that come to be so that we can fill in that gap?
Yeah, really simply, I had this idea of wanting to help support the family, and that's what got the whole thing started. But reality was that the mom and the two girls kind of went into just a year-long period of just traveling and being away, and they were financially in good shape. They didn't want help. It felt weird for a little bit because it was clear that even though I intended to do that, they didn't want that. That's not what that family wanted. And it got weird for a little bit, and I was like, well, you know what? My biggest passion has been supporting the front row, and it was even, from the very beginning, I told Jon I'm not doing it for the front row, I'm going to do it for this, and he was still behind me, thanks. And it just shifted, and I thought, well, why not try to create something cool with this? And so.
So we immediately branded him. If you haven't seen yet, we bought him all the tri gear with all the front row logo. We're like, you're not backing out of this now. You have front row tattooed on you.
Yeah, that was a very uncomfortable part of the whole thing. The hard thing is I'd never even done a race before, and Jon kept asking me when Carl gave me all this advice on front. Carl had a whole video documentary and climbing a mountain strategy to it that was probably really smart if you actually had climbed a mountain before, which Carl did. But I never done any of this, so I was very nervous about fundraising before I actually knew if I could swim, in a lake, So there was no fundraising done in the beginning, but I did commit to do it for the front row. And that, I would say that making that verbal commitment of something bigger than just the thing was a big part of this.
So skipping right into one of my favorite stories of all, which is Johnny having a panic attack. So if you want to hear Johnny tell the story about the panic attack, everybody say panic attack. Panic attack. Johnny, you got to tell him.
So I had all this coaching, and it was the day before my first triathlon. And my plan was to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, load everything up, drive to this lake, and do this Olympic distance race. And so the race was, half a mile. It was a mile swim and 27 miles on the bike, and it was 6 mile run. So it felt good. I felt like I could do it. So I was talking to my coach, and he said, so how's your wetsuit? How's that going? How are you doing with the wetsuit? And I was like, I just rented one. It hasn't come in the mail yet. And he was like, whoa, I've been swimming in a pool. He said, you need to get in the open water. You need to go swim in a lake. And I didn't know all this. So the wetsuit showed up Friday night, and I was like, Johnny, can you come over and watch the kids in the morning? And I'm gonna go to this lake where the people swim, and I'm gonna go swim. And it was totally different. I got 20 feet, and there's all these triathletes, all these people, and they're they have Iron Man tattoos on their forehead, and these people are legit. I mean, I have a big pot belly in my, in my wetsuit. I think it was a little small, it wasn't flattering, I was they're who's this dude, So I got in the water, and I literally swam 25 yards, and I had a total panic attack. The walls closed in. I never had one in my life before. I didn't know what this was. I never felt this way, and I totally thought I was gonna die. And I was only 25 yards from the shore. It took me 15 minutes to get back to the dock and start to get my stuff together. And the next day was my first race. And I was going to have to swim a lot more than 25 yards. And I couldn't breathe in the suit, and, it was a whole thing. But what was cool is I was able to settle myself down at the dock and use some of the mindfulness techniques to get it together. People were staring at me. It was embarrassing. It was awkward. And I got in the water, and I swam 25 yards, and then I swam back. And I swam 25 yards. I wouldn't go more than, people were swimming all the way out in the lake. I was going I was in the kiddie pool. And I got to where I swam for 20 or 30 minutes, and it was dark, you couldn't see. And then when I showed up back in my kitchen, well, you could take it from here, I don't think I was looking too good. It was pretty rough. And that was obvious because Jon immediately called Tatiana and told him that he was going to be coming with me the next day to the race. So the other lesson was sometimes you really need help from a friend. And he got up at 2 o'clock in the morning. We drove a couple hours to this race, and he spent the whole day there. And I was pretty freaked out, but it ended fine. But just the day before, I was ready to quit. I was just done. I couldn't see doing this. This is stupid. This is crazy. This is only a quarter of the distance of the real one, and there's no way I can do this. And it would have been easy to quit if he hadn't decided to come along. So that's another big moment in the whole thing. So using the
All right, we can wrap up there. That sounds good.
It's good. It's cool. So some of the pictures up there are of Jon being there with me in one of those races, and I'll never forget that day. It was really cool. Thank you. I think he was just trying to protect the front row donation thing. I mean, maybe
Wear the uniform, Johnny.
maybe
Put
it was
on.
like a cold, calculated decision on his part, but it felt like friendship. I don't know.
One of the things, I'm sure you've experienced this many times in your life, but one of the great joys in life is being there for people when they're having a big moment in life. And I think that we oftentimes need to look for those moments when we can step in and be there for people at big moments. When John Berghoff did his 330-mile run, and when Carl was climbing K2, and there's all these amazing people that are doing amazing things, whatever it might be, even when somebody's winning silver cups or having incredible push weeks, and you can be front row to their life, that's a privilege. John was talking earlier about the privilege that that we have, the things that we can take for granted now that we need to be grateful for. I felt blessed to be able to watch John go through this transformation in his life. And I felt blessed to be able to listen to him talk about what he was learning from Julianna. I felt so privileged to be able to just be there in support and of service. And I think that your crew, your running crew, the people that are with you along the way, the people that are coaching you, the people that are loving you and cheering for you, the people that are in your front row, as I always talk about it, are so critical. And so I think that it was a blessing for me, John, and thanks for letting me do that, and thanks for wearing the uniform. So you mentioned it would have been easy to pack up and kind of quit at this point because you hadn't fully got it out there that you're going to do this Ironman. You sort of were. I don't know if you were fully in at this point. You were training. You were fully committed to the training. You were not missing a beat. But I don't know that you were 100% in your mind, like, this is going to happen, I'm doing this, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know if that's where you were at this point. Is that right?
The weird thing about it, it's weird the stuff that motivates you. I think that, think about how many times Stevie P and I, we always roomed together at these events, and Steve's my eternal Cutco roommate. And, we had many times where we'd go meet and many experiences where you just start sharing, all the things that the reasons around it. And I just want to say thank you, Stevie P, for tons of support in the process. But I didn't talk about it with many people. In fact, a lot of people didn't know I was even thinking about doing it till 2 weeks before the race. But a few people did. And Steve was one of those people who just kept encouraging me and all along the way. So I wanted to say that. But yeah, I think, I kind of went off on a tangent there. What was your question?
That was good. No, we're going to go to Julianna real quick. Julianna, tell me what's going on right now, what you're observing, what's going through, Johnny's space. What are you working with him on? What's happening now at this point? His first Olympic distance. Let's say he's training now for his first half. What's going on? During that training phase, you mean?
Well, we're practicing, as I mentioned, while he's working out, and sometimes some of the most powerful sessions we had were conceptual. So there's an aspect of it where as he mentioned, I'm helping him refine his skills, and it's sort of like at that point it's like learning tennis from a pro. I have a lot of experience, and practice is subtle, right? So when he trains with me, he maybe picks up on things that he wouldn't be aware of on his own. And in highlighting that, then that enhances his skills. So that's part of what's going on. Another part of it, though, is making the link between the workout, the mental workout that we're doing, the moment-by-moment workout with the challenges, and how that translates into how that's going to serve him during the race. So, for example, there's an emotional challenge, right, that comes with intense physical discomfort. If you're running for a long period of time, at a certain point, your mind starts telling you things, right? You have the thought, I can't do this anymore. And then you have the feeling, maybe fear or hopelessness, whatever it is. And then you have a further thought, how did I get myself into this? And then you have another feeling, terror or whatever it is. So we get caught in these spirals. And so what John is learning at this point is how to disentangle that process, how to stay with emotions, ride emotions, like he said, surf the wave of fear, right, with his attention, so it doesn't turn into a thought like, get me out of here. Or if it turns into a thought like, get me out of here, he doesn't buy into that thought. He doesn't feed it so that it then fuels his emotions again. So he's able to make a distinction between those thoughts and feelings, and he's able to experience them without getting hooked on them, without identifying with them. And that shift frees up his energy to stay focused on the race, to stay focused on what matters, the goal that he set for himself.
So Johnny, you're training, you're getting coached, you've done your first Olympic, you made it through, you're on your way to, skipping ahead here, to your first half Ironman. So take us to that point, and what's going on and what lessons do you learn at your first half Ironman?
So this was about 10 months into the training. And the interesting thing it reminded me of was like the Chinese bamboo story you've heard about how you water the plant, and then suddenly it grows a lot in a little bit of time. So in between that Olympic distance and the half, which is double the distance, the day I did the half, I swam faster than the Olympic time, and the bike was great. It felt so, I don't want to say easy, but it really worked. And in that period of 30 days, I felt like because of priming the pump for 10 months, the growth happened. A lot happened in 30 days, and it was almost like a lot of momentum happened in a short period of time. So the lesson for me is sometimes you really do something for a long time before it clicks. And you think about people in their business, and you start thinking about how do you have a $500,000 year? How do you have a big result? And it's usually a result of doing a lot of the basic things over and over and over again. So at that point, a lot of the real growth was realized in the last 30 to 45 days. The real training came between those two races, because after that race, it's just what they call tapering, where you're just kind of relaxing as you're getting healthy to be able to go do the big race. And so that's a big takeaway of that, that there was a ton of growth out of the whole year, the growth came in 30 days. And a lot of the time didn't feel like nothing was happening.
And you went out on a training run the next day to bike the course, the full course, right? And you kind of celebrated the night before. And
yeah, that's just good. Stay humble. So I did the half and then had a little fun that night afterwards, because we had to do a bike ride the next day. Didn't seem like a big deal after doing that. And I completely bonked and lost my senses and almost crashed. And I completely took for granted that the next day I had to do this thing. So I got a little cocky, I think. And
Who knows what bonked is? Who knows what bonked? Give them a definition of bonked.
It's like when you can't feel or think, and you're just not able to function. You're out of it. I was out of it. I was saying crazy stuff, and I wrote it was not good.
It's a total shutdown.
It's not what you want to happen, and that celebratory beer was probably not a good idea after the race, and then stayed up a little too late. And I thought, well, we're just going to go for a bike ride, but it was not good. So,
has anybody ever bonked during a push? You're like, I get it. I know exactly what that feels like.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah, you need to keep making good decisions, and it really woke me up though, because I was like, okay, let's not blow this. Let's not take a year's worth of work and blow it here. And I almost hurt myself by not. I definitely was not being mindful.
So here Johnny is. He's going through this whole process. He's bonking. He's he's meditating or mindfulness training. He's constantly getting he's getting himself ready for the next thing, and it's a constant challenge along the way. And I want to get to the end result here, Johnny, where you complete the Ironman. You're there. And I want to ask: is there anything that's between this half Ironman to the full Ironman of 2.4 mile swim, which is just for when you completed this? I want to give some context as we fill in some blanks here. But so the 2.4 mile swim was how long in the water?
An hour and a half.
An hour and a half of swimming, followed up by a bike ride, which was how long?
9 hours.
9 hours on the bike, followed up by a full marathon, which was 6 hours long. So that was the day, a total of
16:45.
16:45. But who's counting? So 16:45 for the day.
If you don't finish it in 17, they disqualify you. So there's people who literally came across at 17:01 that they'd say you didn't finish, go home. So you have to do it in 17 hours, or you don't. They tell you thanks for playing. So
this is, how awesome is that? Now, 2 weeks before he goes to do this Ironman, he decides that he's going to turn on the fundraising. So John Berghoff and I were talking along the way going, when's he going to start fundraising? Like, we're 2 weeks out from the actual Ironman. We gave him this gear. He's been wearing the clothes. He should probably raise some money. And so take us to that moment, dude. Why 2 weeks out? Why did you wait? What happened?
I just didn't. I was scared, and I think that I had to get some experience before I didn't have the confidence, and then that ended up being the real fuel for the race. I mean, so people say, what was it? The idea that we raised about $28,000 in 2 weeks. Many of you were a big part of that. Thank you. And I knew that meant, a lot of people were going to get to have the best day of their life. And that on that day, and on the day, that's what I thought a lot about. And the cool thing is, the day before, Julianna and I got on the phone and we did a meditation plan for the race. And we spent a couple hours planning out the way I was going to work with whatever happened that next day. And that was a key part of that day, because stuff happened, and as it always does. And but I would just say that I ran. So a funny story is, I had a front row T-shirt in my bag. You get to halfway through the run, you get to grab a run, and I had this front row T-shirt. And my plan was to put the T-shirt on as I crossed the finish line. A lot of people from the Midwest region saw me wearing a Midwest region shirt, and I haven't really told anybody that wasn't the intention. But what happened is, I had to stop at a porta potty, like at the last mile. It was like having an attack, and the shirt fell out of my pocket into the porta potty, and it was sitting there, and I saw it, and I was like, "Screw the front row! I can't do that. I can do this race, but I'm not putting my hand in that porta potty. That is not happening." So Jeff Bry.
Even John has limits.
So Jeff Bry, to this day, is honored that I wore the Midwest region shirt. This is the first time he's going to know that is an accident, but I need to come clean about that. I just want to let you know that. And it's like I saw the little man. He was like right there. I was like, couldn't do it. So that's a story nobody knows, and that's new. So I don't know how to be. I wasn't mindful or anything at that point. I just need to get the hell out of there.
I think one of the nuggets is that it's not always pretty, right? Sometimes I don't know who said this originally, but it was, don't compare your behind the scenes life to somebody else's highlight reel. Let me say that just one more time. Don't compare your behind the scenes life to somebody else's highlight reel. And so I think that when you hear these stories, I think what's great is they're filled with challenge and adversity and things not going well. And sometimes all we see is the end result and the trophy and people standing on stage, but they don't see all of the adversity that they've battled through on the way there. And when it's kind of a funny one, but when things aren't going well. Julianna, take us to the. You wanted to share something real quick?
I was just going to say, he says stuff happened. Well, as I understand it, that was one of the worst days of weather in the history of the event in that area. And by stuff happens, he meant that there was thunder and lightning going on while they were swimming. And all of them had to be pulled out of the lake simultaneously, right? So.
Yeah, it was not fun.
Right, but what I remember you describing to me is that as you were all marching out of the lake together, you noticed how people's energy was getting diffused in their preoccupation over this unexpected event. But you knew what to do.
Yeah, that really helped. People were freaking out, and which I get. I think, people trained and put a lot in, and they weren't sure if they'd be able to keep racing. It was unknown at that point. It turned out everybody was, but the point is that they didn't know that then, and I was able to stay calm. And that's where it really, all that training, that was the moment it really clicked of just ride it, don't just go with it, and that really helped.
And Julianna, so when you guys were doing the map, you guys were walking through this.
Right.
Was it a 3-hour call?
It was a 2-hour call.
2-hour
I
call.
think. Yeah.
So it's 2 hours, and they literally. Well, you tell them what happened on that 2-hour
Right. So
call.
literally, we started with, okay, the alarm goes off. How are you going to relate to the alarm? Okay, you're picking up your clothes. You know, we found moments, basically moments where no thinking and decision making was going on, where it was something that was a ritual behavior, right? We all hear the alarm in the morning and press it to turn it off. Right at the moment that your alarm goes off, what's your reaction, right? Are you irritated? That's okay if you are, but just notice. Are you excited? Whatever it is, it's a perfect opportunity just as you're waking out of sleep to check in. How am I feeling right now in this moment? So, you know, you pick up the clothes, you put them in the bag, then you're going down the hill to the lake. There are going to be people around you with a real strong competitive spirit. How do you feel about that, John? What's that going to be like? You know, so we would do that, and then okay, so how are you going to handle the transitions? What if, you know, the bike wheel falls off? What are you going to do at a moment like that? So we tried to prepare for adversity by having strategies in place that he could lean on so that he didn't have to think, so that right at that moment he knew, oh, right, okay, I can go to this strategy and do this, and take thinking out of the equation, because when you're in that intense a regime, the more you can ritualize it, the more you can ride on the energy of it, and that's what mindfulness can help you do.
Hey, so at this moment, I want to open it up for a couple of questions. So I'm going to stop asking them. I want to ask the crowd. Brother James has a question. While you guys are thinking about this, I just want to say thank you to John. I want to say thank you to Julianna for taking the time and sharing this. I had to arm wrestle John to get him on this stage to share this story with you. So can we give Johnny some love for doing this? I know this is really uncomfortable for him, because when you know John, you know that his deal isn't to sit around and talk about you know, what he accomplished and how great he is and all those, you know, those types of things. But I think there's so much that we can learn from his experience, as we can from all of your experiences. I mean, you're all amazing. This room is filled with incredible people. Like John Berghoff said earlier, you know, you're in the room with people that could be the most influential people in your life, and maybe already have been. In fact, because it feels so good, turn to the person to your left and your right and say, I'm so lucky to be here with you now. All right. So, questions. I'm going to go to Brother James. Johnny's going to run the mic over there.
So I would like to know some of the specifics of not just the race, but also in your day-to-day life after the race, post-race, where actually, let me make a more specific question, which I think will be more value for everyone and myself. You talked about situations where, and you even alluded to, like, I could get specific with exactly where those situations were in my life before, where I perceived the situation, acted a certain way, responded a certain way, and that now, with the mindfulness training with Julianna, you're able to see it. So kind of just, I would love to hear that, an explanation of that process of what you saw before, what you see now, and then how that situation, how the dynamic of this situation changed because of the way that you were present in this situation.
You know, it shows up most where you're the worst. So a lot of times there's areas of your life, like Fee was talking about earlier today, that you have a reaction to people. Well, you know, I find that when I'm fatigued and I go home at the end of the day, I am less mindful and patient with my family. You know, that the world might get the best from me, but I show up like a piece of crap at home. And I would just say that one of the things I've noticed is that I've been doing a better job of actually having a real conversation at the end of the day and having a little energy left. And so one of the things I do now is I schedule my coaching calls usually at 3 or 4 o'clock, so that there's a gap between my work day and my home day. And it's almost like getting a mental massage, if you will. It's like, you know, and so the biggest difference is that I am becoming more aware of where, there's areas that I didn't even, like, there's some real rough edges that, it's like, I think, yeah, I'm not proud of it, but there's probably parts of my life where I'd come home and I'd be like, you're all just lucky that you get to live this great life you have, and it's because of me or whatever. It's like you just get jerky. You know what I mean? And especially with people you love, and I guess it's helped me be a little gentler and shave off some of those rough edges in my words, and my reactions, and I've been less reactive, I would just say, and more slower to react, and a little more graceful, I would say. You'd have to talk to my wife to see if any of this is true. But
Questions?
in business, I think there's times where you can get really frustrated about stuff that happens, and you can lose it, and you can make judgments. And I think it's just I feel less stressed at this event than I have in running these for years. It's kind of like it's all going to work out. People are going to come. They're going to hang out. They're going to be cool. They're going to learn some stuff. Like, I can't stress about every little thing. So there's all these things we put our energy into that may not be worth all that energy. Like, I want it to go well, but if we're a few minutes late, I mean, we're okay. If there's not enough food, we'll get more food. So I think some of that stuff used to really get me twisted. I remember a time I was at a conference with John, and I was actually training him to take my job as sales promotion manager, and he told me to chill that out. And it was like a moment, he pulled me backstage, he's like, I know what I'm doing, I can do this, just get off my back. And I was freaking out about some minor detail with him, and it was like a moment where I was like, oh, that was kind of cool. But I'm sometimes inside I'm wound more tight than I might appear on the outside. And so, I might be smiling, but my team knows, if something's bugging me, they can see it. And so I'm just trying to be a little better about that. It's helped.
I have a question for Julianna. How can we ride that wave of emotion, let's say it's fear or something in that regard, like a negative emotion, without, riding the wave to get over it without enhancing that emotion and focusing on
Right,
it?
that's a great question. So first of all, you have to be willing for that emotion to get bigger, because that's the nature of it. It's going to get more intense before it gets less intense. So you do have to be willing for the emotion to get bigger. However, the trick is in not allowing the emotion to feed your thinking, but instead, it's the way you focus on it. You focus on it becoming curious and interested in the fear. Well, where is it located? How intense is it? What is the quality of fear? What's that like in my body? Is it moving or is it staying still? So you become fascinated by the experience of fear, and that prevents you from saying, oh, well, this fear is because of this thing I'm thinking, and getting caught up in the story, the associated links that you have with the fear. So you just bring your attention to it, and then also you're trying not to push it away, which is hard. When a challenging emotion comes up, we tend to either push it away or we get caught in it, we get stuck in it. So you're trying to ride that balance where you're noticing it and you're not pushing it away, you're letting it ring out as big as it wants to, but you're also not getting caught in it and starting to build stories around it. That's the balance you want to strike. It's challenging. It takes some time to develop that skillfulness, but that's the goal. Great question.
Awesome question. Other questions? While you're thinking about, yeah, Johnny?
Johnny, I got a question.
Fire away.
This is for Julianna. Julianna, any wisdom that you could share with the room on how they can use mindfulness over the next 2-3 days throughout their experience here? And I'm sure you can envision, everyone here is going to be doing pretty much one of two things, either sitting in a meeting room like this or connecting with other people. So
Right.
knowing all the energies that are going on, any tips how they can use mindfulness, get the most out of it?
That's a great question. So on Thursday, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, the granular level of, well, what is mindfulness and how do you do it? But some sort of quick and dirty ways that you can start to focus. One thing is just to notice any judgments that come up and do your best not to identify with them. Do your best not to buy into whatever judgments you have. Just because they come up in your head, that doesn't mean you have to say, hey, this is mine. You don't have to take ownership of it just because a judgment comes up in your head. So that's a quick one. Also, you may be feeling a lot of wonderful connection with people here. This is an event where you guys are all maybe know each other, you're making new friends. There's something wonderful. There's a lot of positivity in this room. And you can notice, well, where's the joy located right now? Where's that sense of connection and love located right now in my body? The clearer you get about where it's happening in your body, the more you're going to enhance it. So in the same way that fear gets bigger, well, the joy gets bigger too. So if you can just become curious and interested in the positive feelings, then you're also going to enhance and deepen the experience of those positive feelings as well. I'm trying to think if there's any other way. You can check in, sometimes also we get sleepy, right, in these situations. And that quality of sleepiness has a particular, it's like you get maybe a little tired around the eyes. You want to stay open to that too. Open and curious is the name of the game. So that even something like sleepiness, if you learn how to be skillful with sleepiness, you're basically converting it into energy. Not easy to do, but if you stay open to it, become curious about it, do your best not to fight with the feeling of sleepiness. Sometimes it can actually buoy your energy. Those are some thoughts.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Gentlemen, give it up for Jon and Julianna.